Ebony Hart's thumb hovered over Dad on her cracked phone screen as the cabin lights shifted into soft, welcome mode. At 17, she'd flown hundreds of times, but nothing prepared her for Jessica Harper's voice booming through the aisle. "Miss Hart, get up, now!" Her heart seized. Ebony's notebook slipped from her lap, pages fanning across the aisle carpet. She froze, eyes darting to the rows of business-class passengers. They exchanged uneasy glances, but no one moved to help. Harper stood with military precision, mid-30s, steel-gray bun, eyes cold as polished chrome. Beside her, Michael Daniels folded his arms, offering Ebony a silent ultimatum. "Please stand and follow us," Harper repeated, voice low but unyielding. Ebony's voice caught in her throat. I have seat 2A, she managed, trembling. "My ticket's confirmed." Harper's lips curved into a faint smirk. "Our decision is final." Time slowed. The drone of the engines felt deafening. A businessman cleared his throat, mouthed, "I'm sorry," to Ebony, and then froze under Harper's steely glare. A single thought crystallized in Ebony's mind. This isn't over. She took a measured breath, sliding her hand, and hope, into her pocket. Fingers brushing the name Dad, she pressed the call button. Instantly, the cabin monitor flickered to life, cutting power to the in-flight entertainment. Every passenger turned, drawn to the sudden hush. Ebony held her breath. The screen split in two. On the left, an image of her own trembling hand. On the right, the words "Project Eclipse activated" pulsed in bold white letters. Behind the scenes at Pacific Sky's headquarters in Chicago, her father, Martin Hart, CEO, leaned forward, eyes blazing. On his screen, 9 board members appeared in a video feed, each one counting down to a decision that would rewrite the rules of this flight. Ebony's pulse thundered in her ears. Shock and defiance collided inside her chest, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, imagining the moment her father would swing the balance of power her way. Below the monitor, text scrolled across every passenger's device. "Have you ever been judged by something beyond your control? Share your story." Then the screen blinked, and Harper's jaw went slack. Ebony stood, shoulders squared, as the first domino fell, her one call igniting a chain reaction no one on Flight 762 would ever forget. Ebony's chest heaved as the cabin monitor pulsed with "Project Eclipse activated." For a heartbeat, she let herself breathe, but only for an instant. Memories flooded back so sharply she could almost feel her mother's hand on her shoulder. Just a few months ago, she'd stood on the stage at Lincoln Park High School, diploma in hand, valedictorian address echoing in the auditorium. Her cap was tilted at a jaunty angle, tassels swinging, and she'd smiled up at the proud faces in the crowd, especially her mom's, shining with tears of joy. That moment had been everything. Validation for late nights coding algorithms, perfect grades, and a dream scholarship to MIT worth nearly $120,000. But that light had dimmed suddenly when her mother passed away last spring, the victim of a rare illness. Ebony had plunged into grief so deep she almost slipped a semester. It was her father, Martin Hart, who caught her before she fell. He sat by her bedside, exhaustion etched on his CEO features, whispering, "I can't lose you too." Those words had steeled her resolve to honor her mom's legacy, work harder, dream bigger. Now, 38,000 feet above Chicago, that resolve burned brighter than ever. She reached out, fingertips brushing the window's vaulted curve, reminding herself why she mattered. This wasn't just about a seat or a flight. It was about every late-night coding session, every scholarship essay, every promise she'd ever made. She glanced back at Jessica Harper, standing rigidly in the aisle, eyes narrowed. Ebony lifted her chin. "Sir," she began quietly, voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Ebony Hart. I've earned that seat. My scholarship to MIT is real. My mother believed in me. My father believed in me. I deserve to be here." But Harper's gaze slid past her, as if she weren't even there. "I'm sorry," a passenger murmured from 2 rows back. I didn't know what to do. Ebony caught his eye and offered a small, grateful nod. In that instant, she understood something. Courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a quiet plea for fairness. Her heart swelled with gratitude and quiet pride. She wasn't alone. Even in that tense cabin, kindness flickered. Her mother's voice whispered in her ear, "Stand tall, Ebony, never back down." And she wouldn't. As the hum of engines blended with her steady heartbeat, Ebony knew this fight was far from over, and that every piece of her past had led to this moment of unshakable conviction. Whispers rippled down the aisle like a sudden storm. Business travelers leaned forward in their seats, straining for a glimpse of what was unfolding. A woman in a tailored blazer mouthed, "Is this really happening?" to her neighbor, who shook his head, eyes wide. The quiet hum of the engines and the soft ping of seatbelt signs felt distant, overshadowed by the electricity in the cabin. Ebony's suitcase clattered to the floor with a harsh thud, notebooks and a half-finished drawing spilling out. She bent to gather them, heart pounding. Every eye in the cabin was on her, some filled with sympathy, others with discomfort, and a few with indifference. Jessica Harper stalked past, each step measured and deliberate, as if on a stage. Harper's heels clicked against the carpet as she intercepted Ebony's outstretched hand, plucked the drawing from her fingers, and tossed it aside. "Excuse me," Ebony managed, her voice low but steady. "Please return my belongings." Her pulse hammered in her ears. Gratitude for those who cared was drowned out by a deeper swell of anger. How dare they treat her like a criminal, like she didn't belong? A timid cough drew her gaze to a middle-aged man 3 rows back. He rose halfway, about to stand, but Harper's sharp glare froze him in place. The man sank back down, swallowing hard. I can help," he said, voice trembling. Harper's eyes flashed with thinly veiled contempt as she waved him off. "No need," she said curtly. Then to Ebony, "Collect your things later." Her tone brooked no argument. Alone under that harsh spotlight, Ebony felt isolation coil around her like ice. Every instinct screamed to bolt, to collapse, to break, and yet she stayed upright. The injustice of it fueled her resolve. She would not be cowed. Passengers shifted uneasily. A mother clutched her child's armrest. A suited executive lifted his smartphone, poised to capture evidence, but hesitated, glancing at Harper's stern profile. Fear and politeness warred in their faces. Ebony straightened her spine. Her chest tightened with a blend of fury and disbelief. This wasn't merely about a seat. It was about dignity. With each passing moment, she felt the cabin's collective breath held in suspense, as if the entire plane teetered on the edge of what might come next. And in that pregnant silence, Ebony realized the power of her next move could tip the balance. The tension was a live wire, ready to snap, and she would decide when. Ebony sank onto the aisle floor, the plush carpet muted under her knees. Around her, the cabin buzzed with the soft drone of engines and the faint rustle of seatbelt signs clicking on. She pulled her phone from her pocket, thumb hovering over her father's name, but paused, mind racing faster than her heartbeat. For a moment, the world narrowed to the weight of her own breath and the distant murmur of passengers. Her chest tightened as she replayed the last few minutes. The harsh glare of Jessica Harper, the cold command to stand, the stunned silence that fell over business class. Ebony's pulse pounded in her ears, each beat a reminder that she'd been stripped of her dignity in full view of strangers. A single tear pricked the corner of her eye, and she brushed it away, determined not to let her emotions spill over. But beneath the humiliation lay something else, a spark of defiance. This wasn't an ordinary injustice. It was personal. It was every late-night coding session she'd endured alone, every scholarship essay she'd revised until dawn, every lecture she'd excelled in despite being different. She thought of her mother's voice, soft yet unwavering, telling her that strength often hid in silence. And she thought of her father, who had promised he would move heaven and earth to protect her. Ebony straightened her shoulders. She pressed her phone against her palm, feeling its solid reassurance. In that quiet moment, the anger that had threatened to unravel her steadied into purpose. She would not be cast aside. She would not disappear into the background. A hush seemed to settle over the aisle as she glanced up. No one was rushing to intervene, yet she sensed an undercurrent of tension, a shared expectation that something was about to change. The cabin monitor flickered, as if responding to her resolve, and for a heartbeat, she felt the power of her impending call. Have you ever felt powerless in a crowd? Share your story below. Ebony inhaled, tapped her father's contact, and watched as the screen lit up. In that charged silence, she knew she held the next move, and with it, the chance to reclaim her voice. Ebony's fingers trembled around her phone as she pressed her dad's name. With every second that ticked by, the hush in the cabin felt heavier, an electric charge humming through the aisles. At 38,000 feet, she gathered courage and tapped call. In Chicago, Martin Hart's office at Pacific Sky's headquarters fell silent when his screen flashed, "Incoming, E. Hart." He straightened the cufflinks on his suit jacket, glanced at the city skyline beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, then answered with a calm, "Ebony?" Her voice cracked the moment she spoke. "Dad, they're forcing me off the flight, without cause." She swallowed hard as she watched Jessica Harper loom behind her, arms crossed like a gauntlet. "I need you." Martin's expression turned steely. He tapped a red button hidden beneath his desk. Protocol Eclipse. Instantly, his phone muted the line and switched to secure conference mode. Back on Flight 762, cabin monitors flickered. The lull of background music stuttered, then cut out. A bold countdown appeared. T50 Con. 9 video panels sprang to life, each revealing a Pacific Skies board member's face. The glow of their screens illuminated Harper's stiff posture. "Members of the board," Martin's voice resonated through every speaker. "We have an emergency vote. Suspend Ms. Harper for conduct unbecoming an officer of this airline." Each director clicked yea or nay in real time, the cabin display pulsing with each decision. Ebony pressed her forehead against the cool seatback as her heart hammered. 5 votes in favor. The monitor split screen. On the left, the words "Motion passed." On the right, a live feed of Harper's abrupt change in expression. Jaw slack, eyes wide. The counter hit 0. Suddenly, every passenger's in-flight screen lit up with a message from Martin himself. "An apology on behalf of Pacific Skies. We stand for dignity and respect, always." Harper's remote mic cut out. Airline security personnel materialized at the front of the cabin, crisp uniforms and badges gleaming. Without a word, they escorted her down the aisle and off the plane at the next waypoint. Ebony watched, breath catching as the last piece fell into place. Shock gave way to relief, and relief bloomed into quiet triumph. Her single call had unleashed a hidden network of power, proving that even the smallest voice, at the right moment, could tip the scales. The cabin lights dimmed once more as the display shifted to a stark, digital countdown. T50. Ebony pressed her palm to her chest, feeling the rushed thump behind her ribs. Around her, passengers leaned forward, drawn into the silent drama unfolding above the clouds. On the left side of the split screen, the countdown clock ticked off seconds. On the right, 9 faces appeared in a tiled video conference. Pacific Skies board members in crisp offices from Boston to Los Angeles, all illuminated by their own screens. Men and women in tailored suits exchanged brief nods, hands poised over keyboards. Martin Hart filled the largest window. He stood, back straight, voice calm yet commanding. "Board members, we have a motion to suspend Ms. Harper from duty for unbecoming conduct. Please register your vote now." Silence settled, punctuated only by the hum of electronics. Each director clicked yea or nay, and their votes glowed on the cabin monitors like tiny beacons of justice. Ebony counted under her breath. Yea. Dr. Sonia Patel, Boston, yea. Jorge Ramirez, Miami. Nay, Selena Cho, Seattle. Yea, Ahmed El Sayed, Dallas. Yea, Linda Montgomery, Atlanta. 4 more to go. Ebony swallowed, her throat dry. A bead of sweat traced her jawline as the displayed names flickered. Yea, Michael Chen, San Francisco. Yea, Patricia Reed, Denver. Now just 2 remained. The cabin's hush deepened. Even the soft click of seatbelt buckles sounded like thunder. Yea, Robert Ngoma, New York. 1 vote left. Ebony closed her eyes, imagining each tick of the clock as a heartbeat. Her father's voice in her ear. Justice is ours to wield. Then the final vote appeared. Yea, Carla Martinez, Chicago motion passed, blazed across every screen. The countdown froze at T002, replaced by bold text. Docket approved. Ms. Harper suspended. For an instant, the cabin was silent. An expectant breath held collectively. Then, a ripple of realization spread. Justice had been formally delivered. Ebony exhaled with relief so profound it felt like returning to Earth itself. Around her, passengers exchanged looks of awe and relief. Some released held breaths. Others allowed tentative smiles. The tension that had coiled tight moments ago began to unwind. As the final glow of the vote faded, Ebony met her father's eyes on the screen. No words were needed. In that suspended moment, 5 minutes that had reshaped the flight, she knew the balance of power had irrevocably shifted in her favor. The moment the screen blinked, motion passed. Cabin monitors surged to life with new images. On the left, a grainy body cam video played in a loop. Jessica Harper's clipped commands, her cold disregard as she shoved Ebony toward the aisle. Every flicker of contempt crystal clear. On the right, a live feed of Martin Hart's face filled half the screen, calm, determined, and resolute. Passengers watched in stunned silence, eyes glued to the glaring evidence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the cabin lights dimmed further, cueing a soft hum that built into a swelling crescendo. From overhead vents, tiny biodegradable confetti drifted down, white pieces stamped in pale gold with the word equality. At first, a few flakes settled on Ebony's shoulders, then more fluttered around her like snow in a winter dawn. The confetti swirled in the bright cabin lamps, giving the scene a surreal, almost ceremonial glow. Harper's jaw went slack, shoulders slumping as she watched herself exposed in high definition. She reached a trembling hand up, as if to wipe away the footage, but the cameras had already captured every angle. Security personnel moved in with precise professionalism. No harsh words, just the steady click of cuffs as they escorted her down the aisle. Passengers gasped softly, some leaning forward to catch one of the falling confetti pieces, others exchanging glances of astonishment. Ebony pressed her palm to her chest, breath catching like a bird in flight. Relief washed over her, mingled with pride and a deep, trembling gratitude. She looked around at the sea of faces, executives in sharp suits, families bundled in coats, solitary travelers on their own journeys, now united by a single, unforgettable moment of justice. A mother nudged her child and whispered, "This is what right looks like," and the little girl nodded solemnly, her eyes shining. The monitors switched to Martin's pre-recorded apology. "On behalf of Pacific Skies, I offer my deepest regret and commitment to treat every passenger with dignity and respect." Soft applause rippled through the cabin, hesitant at first, then swelling into a genuine ovation. Ebony allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The confetti continued to drift down until the last piece settled, carpeting the aisle in a mosaic of hope. In that transformed cabin, where power had shifted with a single decisive moment, Ebony felt the weight of every late-night study session, every sacrifice made on her behalf, finally vindicated. Today, at 38,000 feet, A girl's single phone call had rewritten the rules of respect and equality for everyone on board. By the time the seatbelt sign finally clicked off, the cabin had transformed into the epicenter of an unexpected social wave. Passengers pulled out phones, not to capture the drama unfolding before them, but to share it with the world. Within minutes, the hashtag Equity Telltales began trending, first among flight attendants turned advocates, then law professors, and soon even celebrity activists weighed in. Ebony watched as notifications pinged non-stop. A business traveler in 3C posted a short clip of the confetti moment with the caption, "This is how you do justice." It went viral within seconds. A Chicago radio host retweeted her mother's proud message, "That's my girl," standing tall when it counted most. Across platforms, people wrote how they'd experienced discrimination in airports, schools, even hospitals, and how watching Ebony's courage gave them hope to speak up. A crew member from another airline slid into Ebony's aisle to whisper, "You changed everything." She smiled, heart swelling, realizing that this wasn't just her father's power at work. It was her voice multiplied 1,000-fold. Strangers bumped elbows in solidarity, a ripple of understanding spreading through first class and coach alike. Back on the ground, chatter extended beyond social media. Flight attendants at Pacific Skies passed around a printed memo outlining the new passenger dignity protocol, promising mandatory bias training and a zero-tolerance policy for arbitrary removals. Even rival airlines announced internal reviews of their own procedures under pressure from outraged customers and legislators alike. Ebony leaned back in her seat, breathing in the collective energy. Her finger hovered over the keyboard as she drafted a quick post. "Thank you for your stories and support. Let's keep lifting each other up. How would you handle it if this happened to your family?" Almost instantly, replies poured in. A grandmother who'd been told she didn't belong in a wheelchair seat. A student who'd been mocked for his accent. A war veteran who'd faced impossible lines. Each story stitched together a tapestry of shared struggle and shared resolve. By the time Pacific Skies touched down in Chicago, Equity Telltales had become more than a trend. It was a clarion call. Ebony stood in the jet bridge glow, suitcase in hand, feeling the weight of every comment and repost settle around her shoulders like a mantle of purpose. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was part of a movement. And this was only the beginning. By the time the jet bridge doors opened in Chicago, Ebony already felt the weight of what had happened shift into something larger than herself. As she stepped onto the tarmac, her phone buzzed with another notification, this time from Pacific Skies' official account. A live-streamed town hall meeting was starting in just minutes, and everyone was invited. Back at headquarters, Martin Hart stood at a podium in the main conference room, flanked by his executive team. Behind him, a banner read, "Pacific Skies, Commitment to Dignity." Ebony joined via video feed on a large screen, her face framed by the sparkle of confetti still caught in her hair from the flight. Martin cleared his throat. "Today, we acknowledge a failure in our service, and we vow to make it right." He gestured to a slide titled Passenger Restoration Plan. Under it, 3 bullet points appeared. Full compensation for any passenger removed without just cause. Mandatory bias training for all crew and ground staff, every single one. Independent oversight committee to review complaints and publish quarterly reports. Ebony's heart swelled as he spoke. She saw faces around her, employees she'd never met, their expressions a mix of relief and resolve. Martin continued, "We'll begin by reaching out to each person affected, offering not only refunds but also personal apologies. No seat, no matter how premium, should ever be a platform for discrimination." A ripple of applause swept through the virtual room. A young flight attendant wiped tears from her eyes, and a customer service agent nodded firmly, already taking notes on how to implement the new guidelines. Then Martin leaned in, voice softer but no less determined. "I asked Ebony to trust in this company, and she did. We owe her, and every one of you, not just words, but lasting change. Ebony leaned forward toward her camera. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. "This means more than you know." Behind her, the conference room erupted into heartfelt applause. A banner slid into view on the live stream. Pacific Skies Equity Pledge, with a link for passengers to share feedback and stories of their own experiences. As the meeting concluded, Ebony exhaled, feeling the shift from crisis to constructive action. She thought of her mother's voice again. Change starts with one brave stand. Today, she and her father had turned a moment of injustice into a promise of progress. And for the first time, Ebony saw Pacific Skies not just as a carrier of passengers, but as a vessel for genuine, lasting dignity. When Ebony finally walked through the front door of her family's Chicago townhouse, the late afternoon light filtered through the living room blinds, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. She eased off her carry-on bag, letting its weight tumble to the floor with a soft thud. The rush of cameras and confetti and late-breaking policies felt miles away now. Martin Hart emerged from his home office, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He offered a small, tired smile. "Welcome home," he said, relief warming his voice. Ebony nodded and sank onto the edge of the sofa, phone in hand and still brimming with notifications. She could feel the adrenaline ebbing from her limbs, replaced by a gentle tiredness. She tapped open her notes app, a habit she'd developed to keep thoughts clear, and started typing. "Thank you, Dad, for believing in me, even when everything seemed against us. Today wasn't just about a seat. It was about who we are and what we stand for. I promise to keep using my voice for those who can't. Love, Eb." Her fingertip hovered over send, but she paused, feeling the weight of her own words. This note wasn't just to her father. It was a promise to herself. She closed the app and slipped the phone into her pocket. In the hush of the room, she thought back to her mother's bright laugh and her patient encouragement when schoolwork felt impossible. She remembered the nights spent hunched over a laptop, lines of code reflecting in her eyes, and the promise she made to honor her mother's legacy by making the world a fairer place. Martin settled beside her, one hand brushing hers. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "You used your voice, and you made a difference." Ebony leaned into the moment, letting the warmth fill her. "It wasn't just me," she replied softly. "It was all of us. Every passenger, every friend who shared their story, everyone who said, 'That's not right.'" He nodded. "This is just the beginning," she smiled, thinking of the town hall chat, the flurry of messages, and the new equity pledge taking shape. With peaceful determination, Ebony stood and walked to the window. The city spread out before her, an expanse of possibility and challenge. Taking a deep breath, she whispered to the skyline, "Here's to the next step." In that quiet moment, away from screens and speeches, Ebony Hart recognized that true change started within, and she was ready to lead the way. A week later, Ebony found herself in a small recording studio tucked into Pacific Skies' downtown Chicago office. Soft foam panels lined the walls, and a single microphone stood between her and a glowing on-air sign. She'd been invited to co-host a special episode of the popular podcast, Tales of Quiet Justice, and as she pulled on a pair of headphones, her heart thrummed with anticipation. Across from her sat Maya Rodriguez, the show's host, a seasoned journalist whose calm, empathetic questions had guided countless guests through their hardest truths. Maya offered Ebony an encouraging nod. "Ready?" she asked. Ebony took a breath. "Let's do it." The red light blinked on, and Maya's warm voice filled the room. "Welcome back to Tales of Quiet Justice. Today, we have a very special guest, Ebony Hart, whose single call on Pacific Skies Flight 762 sparked a movement for equality at 38,000 feet. Ebony, thank you for joining us." Ebony smiled, ear to ear. "Thank you for having me, Maya." Maya leaned forward. "When you pressed call, did you know what would happen next?" Ebony paused, considering. Honestly, I felt powerless in that aisle, but I also knew I couldn't let that define me. I trusted that my father and Pacific Skies would listen. I wanted to prove that one voice can ripple into something bigger. As they spoke, Maya cued sound bites from the flight. Harper's harsh orders, the cabin's stunned silence, the confetti drifting like snowflakes. Ebony's eyes shone as she recounted the anxiety, the surge of hope when the countdown appeared, and the collective gasp as justice was served. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, then asked, "Ebony, what do you hope listeners take away from your story?" Ebony's voice softened. "That speaking up matters. Whether you're 17 or 70, your experience deserves respect. If you see something wrong, say something, because silence lets injustice win." She turned slightly toward the microphone and added earnestly, "Comment below. Have you ever witnessed discrimination on a plane? Your story could inspire someone else to act." As the podcast wrapped, Maya thanked her. The off-air sign illuminated, and Ebony exhaled, adrenaline tingling. She had transformed fear into purpose once again. Walking out of the booth, she felt a new kind of power, not just her father's influence, but her own voice amplified through every listener's speakers. Today, she wasn't just a passenger or a daughter of a CEO. She was a storyteller, an advocate, and a living proof that quiet justice can echo far beyond a single flight. A month after the Flight 762 incident, Pacific Skies lobby in Chicago buzzed with quiet anticipation. Ebony Hart stood at a podium flanked by her father, Martin Hart, and several board members. Behind them, a sleek video wall displayed the bold title, Pacific Skies Equity Charter, in polished gold lettering. Martin cleared his throat and smiled at the gathered crowd of employees, travelers, and media. "Today marks more than a policy change," he began, voice steady with conviction. "It is our commitment to uphold dignity for every passenger, every crew member, every single flight." The video wall shifted to showcase the Equity Charter's 3 pillars: restorative compensation, immediate full reimbursement for any unjust removal, plus a complimentary future flight; mandatory bias training, all frontline and leadership staff certified annually in equity and inclusion; independent oversight, an external committee of community advocates, legal experts, and passengers to review incidents and publish quarterly reports. Ebony watched faces in the audience light up, flight attendants whispering to one another, a family clasping hands, an elderly veteran nodding in approval. Then Martin gestured toward Ebony. "But words are only as strong as the actions behind them. Ebony, would you say a few words?" Ebony stepped forward, heart swelling. She glanced at the charter text, then looked directly at the crowd. "One phone call changed a flight," she said, voice clear and warm. "But it took every one of us, those who spoke up, those who listened, those who believed in change. This charter isn't just a document. It's our promise to each other. We will stand against injustice, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable." Applause rippled through the room, genuine and heartfelt. Martin hugged his daughter for a moment before stepping back. The video wall faded into a list of resources, hotlines for reporting bias, links to share personal stories, and a simple prompt: how will you carry this promise forward? Share your pledge. As people filed past the podium to take their printed equity charter, Ebony felt a profound sense of closure and a new beginning. Her mother's memory, her father's support, and her own courage had fused into something lasting. Later, as the sun dipped below Chicago's skyline, Ebony looked out at the city lights. She whispered to herself, "This is just the start." And in that promise to the world and to herself, she knew the skies and the future truly belonged to everyone.